40A. This public hearing has been duly advertised, and notice thereof has been posted and mailed to the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and abutting towns. This hearing is being held for the purpose of providing an opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding the proposed amendment to the Amherst zoning bylaw/map. This amendment will be on the town meeting warrant for the fall special town meeting. Again, A0212, form-based village center rezoning. To amend the official zoning map for North Amherst Village and Atkins Corners, and to amend the zoning bylaw, including Articles 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 12, as well as Section 3.3, use classification and standards, the use chart, and Table 3, dimensional regulations, and to add a new Article 16, form-based zoning. We'll hear first from the proponent of this article, which is the zoning subcommittee. Then we'll hear comments and questions from board members and open the meeting to the public. I'd request that all speakers first be recognized by me, the chair, and you'll be asked to identify yourselves by your name and your street address. Please direct your comments to me or questions. After that, we will, after testimony and discussion have been completed, we'll either continue the hearing or move to close it. Let's see. This also, I'd like to mention that this is being broadcast on Amherst Media and also is being taped by town staff for use in preparing the minutes. Okay. Mr. O'Keefe, would you like to speak to this article?
Sure. So, as you probably know, this is the big form-based rezoning project that we've been working on for quite a long time in both North Amherst and Atkins Corner. This is the first major implementation step for the master plan, one of the first steps. To try to strengthen the two village centers in the northern and southern parts of town. Earlier this year, we retained the services of a consultant, the Cecil Group, and we've been working with Steve Cecil and his staff since the early spring on putting together a proposal here. Cecil Group came out and conducted a series of public design workshops or charrettes on site in both North Amherst and South Amherst in May. And we've been holding a series of meetings. They've been part of many of them also as we developed and refined this proposal. The Cecil Group gave us their initial draft zoning regulations around the end of August, and the zoning subcommittee has been meeting since then, working through that and trying to adapt their recommendations to our specific circumstances here and make sure everything is reasonable and appropriate. We've been meeting almost every week since then to work through it, and we have a document that we think is quite good at this point, and we're really looking forward to moving ahead with it. Just in terms of housekeeping, the proposal is this big, thick document which we all have on our desks, and there's plenty of them available in the back of the room in the boxes there for the folks in the audience here. And for people that are following along at home, these documents are also available on the town website. If you go to the planning board page, there's a couple of PDFs there that have the full set of documents that we're discussing here as well. I won't go through the whole document here with us tonight because it is lengthy. But the highlights really are that this is our first attempt to implement a form-based code in Amherst zoning. We've never done this before, and that's why we reached out and got the expertise of Steve Cecil and his group to put together this initial draft of the form-based regulations. And what that means is that our zoning currently doesn't speak at length to the built environment, the look and feel of the buildings that get constructed. It just really confines itself to the uses that are allowed in any given zoning district. And the master plan that we adopted a couple of years ago now speaks very clearly to wanting to sort of modernize how we do zoning and to strengthen our village centers and pay more attention to the appearance of the village centers to make sure that they're appropriate, preserving the character of the centers where that's appropriate, and trying to encourage infill and development in the town center and village centers so as to concentrate residential units there and protect open space in other parts of town. So as I said earlier, this is the first major step, one of the first major steps in that direction that we've taken. So how this form-based code for North Amherst and Atkins Corner is organized is that it proposes to create 2 new zoning districts. One for North Amherst is called the North Amherst Village Center Zoning District, and it's abbreviated NAVC in all the documentation. And the other one is called the Atkins Corner Atkins Corner Zoning District, and that's abbreviated AC in the set of documents that we have. Those would be new zoning districts, just like any other zoning district currently in our bylaw. And so what that means for each one of those districts, we would be changing the table of use categories that's in the zoning bylaw that defines which uses are allowed in each district. It adds 2 new columns to that table, one for each of the 2 new districts, and it specifies for every one of those 60 or 70 uses that are in our zoning bylaw, whether they are allowed, not allowed, allowed by site plan review, or allowed by special permit. For every one of those uses, it's defined which of those holds true. So that's the use part of the regulations, and that's a major aspect of what we've been looking at. The other half of this, the other substantial piece of it, is a set of form-based regulations that governs what any development would have to look like, and design patterns it would have to conform to. And there's a couple of ways that that's expressed in the document. There are a set of what they call street types, which are defining different types of streets in terms of commercial streets, residential streets, smaller back streets. And the form-based regulations have guidelines or requirements for each one of those street types. Depending on what type of street you're on, it says things about setbacks and how the buildings are placed in relationship to the street, and parking, and the form of the buildings, and so on. So that's a street-based regulatory mechanism. There's also a set of definitions of building types, talking about civic buildings, commercial buildings, residential buildings, various types of residential buildings. And there are regulations in there that affect each one of those building types as well. So when you're looking at something that's proposed in one of these areas, you've got several different ways of controlling what happens. You've got the use requirements that we're used to dealing with that are part of our existing zoning bylaw. And you've also got aspects that are based on what type of street it's on and what type of building it is. And based on the intersection of those sets of regulations, some things would be allowed and other things wouldn't be allowed, depending on what you're proposing to build. So again, I'm not going to go through all the details of it. We have spent the last 2 meetings that we spent at the zoning subcommittee, we have gone through every one of the use categories and thought about and talked about which ones would be appropriate in which district. And we ended up with a set of regulations that is largely based on our existing zoning districts for the town center and for the village center business districts, because these are essentially core village center districts. So the uses that are allowed there would be fairly similar to what's allowed in BVC districts currently in town, but in many cases with additional standards and conditions on the uses to further control and regulate, in some cases limit the size of various aspects of things that could be developed there. So in both North Amherst and South Amherst, we also are proposing, in addition to the 2 new zoning districts that I mentioned earlier, the NAVC and the AC districts, we're also proposing new overlay districts, which would impose these form-based regulatory mechanisms on the underlying zoning districts, but not change the underlying zoning districts. So all the uses that are allowed there would still be the same as they are today, but there would be additional conditions controlling the form of what might be developed there. And so on the maps that we have, the new districts are shown in orange in both North Amherst and Atkins Corner. And then there's additional dotted boundaries sort of around the edges, some of the edges, that would be the extent of these new form-based overlay districts that would sort of sit around the edges of the new district and regulate the form in those periphery areas without changing the underlying uses. There would just be the form regulations, none of the use changes. There's also proposals to change some of the underlying zoning around the edges of these districts as well. In particular for North Amherst, which we'll be talking about tonight, one of the main issues in North Amherst has been looking at what happens along Montague Road, Route 63, versus what happens along Sunderland Road, which leads up toward the bridge in Sunderland. And trying to direct the commercial and business activity towards Sunderland Road and preserve the residential character of Montague Road, while still allowing sufficient density of people there to make for a successful and vibrant village center. So the proposed new NAVC zoning district along in that area extends through the central part between those two roads, and it extends up Sunderland Road. It does not extend along Montague Road. What we're proposing there is to change the underlying zoning along Montague Road to RVC, Village Center Residence, which is the main residential zone that we have surrounding most village centers in town today. There are also some changes to the zoning in Atkins Corners, but I won't talk about that tonight because we've got a whole separate public hearing scheduled for that. And it's worth mentioning that the structure of this, so we scheduled 2 separate public hearings with the understanding that this is a big, complicated issue that we need time to talk about and that people will have lots of questions and comments about, and that a lot of that is location specific. So people obviously have concerns about the areas that they're living and working in. So we divided it up to have one part of the public hearing tonight to just focus on North Amherst, and the second one, which will take place 2 weeks from now, will be Atkins Corners. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the zoning itself. In terms of the process, we've been having a lot of discussion over the last few weeks about where we are with this and whether we're ready to go to town meeting or not, because it is big and we have been working really hard on it. And we were not sure whether we would have it ready in time for fall town meeting. That's been our target all along, but we weren't sure whether we'd be able to hit that or not. And so at the meeting tonight, Rob and I reviewed the status, reviewed the progress that we've made on this so far, and we are recommending at this point that we do have this on the warrant for fall town meeting and go ahead with it. We think that, particularly with what we've accomplished over the last few weeks, it is in good shape now. It is ready to go to fall town meeting, and hopefully we can pass it there. We had looked at other options too, from pulling it from the warrant entirely and trying for a special town meeting over the winter, delaying it till spring, or leaving it on the warrant and just moving to refer it if we weren't ready. But we do feel that we are pretty much ready now. We do have some more work to do between now and town meeting, and we probably will be doing that over the next few weeks. But by the time we get to town meeting, we will be ready for it. So that's where we are with it right now, and that's why we're here having this public hearing, at which the planning board will need to, when we're done with the whole thing, make a recommendation to town meeting as to what to do with this article.
Thank you, Jonathan. Would any other members of the zoning subcommittee like to speak to this?
Sure, I will. I just want to distill what this is. One, it does not replace current zoning. Form-based code will supplement current zoning. So we're going to have new zones with all the same kinds of uses that we had before, and we're also going to have form-based code in these areas. That's all it is. So you can look at it in 2 separate pieces.
Maybe you could describe a little bit about the process that's taken place in the zoning subcommittee in the last few weeks, what changes have been made.
Did I hear it correctly that you will not do South Amherst tonight?
That's correct. We're doing North Amherst tonight. South Amherst will be held in 2 weeks.
We've gone through the use chart and we've made a few changes. We received a packet like this a month ago from the Cecil Group, and we've made our own changes to it based on feedback that we've gotten from the public, based on our own thoughts. And so what we got originally is pretty much intact, but there are a few changes that have been made in the use and in the map. And we're actually, sorry, and we're not done with it. We're still going through it. We're going to review the dimensional table. We're going to review the form standards in Chapter 16.
Thank you. So I'll open discussion up to the entire board at this point, if anyone has questions or comments. If not, I'll open the meeting to the public. Again, I'd like to ask that you be recognized by raising your hand. Please come forward to the microphone and identify yourself and state your street address. And since we have a lot of people here tonight, we would appreciate if you could keep your comments to a reasonable length. Meeting is open to comment. Yes.
Hilda Greenbaum, 298 Montague Road. And I just have a couple of suggestions that would make this document a little bit more palatable. One is a wish. And the wish is that you could look at our traffic patterns where 5 roads come together and how unsafe it is to try to go south from Montague Road and hit the traffic coming downhill around a blind corner from North Pleasant Street going north, and then pull out far enough to see what's coming, and then you get hit by somebody going south on something has to be done about that, and we really wish that you could look at the traffic patterns and figure out where Montague Road is going to go before you decide what uses are going to go there. But obviously that's not going to happen at this town meeting. That's just my wish list. The other thing that I really wish that you would look at is 3.322, which is townhouses. That if we're going to have, which we all said we didn't want multifamily housing north of Meadow Street, we really wanted to keep Montague Road RN as it is now. But to make it more palatable, and if we have to have multifamily housing, I think that the impact of townhouses, you can't control who's going to live in them, so you have to assume the worst. And hopefully if we get the wonderful visions that people have been telling us that North Amherst is going to look like, it won't be a problem. But just in case, if you look at 3.322, which is townhouses, everywhere in town where they are allowed, which is RVC, limited business, BVC, BN, are all allowed by special permit, except for RG around the BG in the downtown is site plan review. And that's the same for apartments, site plan review in BG. And apartments is, wherever they're allowed, is also by special permit. Now, North Amherst Village Center and Atkins Corner Village Center makes them by site plan review by right. And I really don't think that's fair. It does not allow the neighbors as much power to shape what happens, especially if 40 feet high is a lot higher on Montague Road than any of the abutting houses, possibly with the exception of Miss Jones's house and Mr. Jones's, Walter Jones's barn there. They may be 40 feet, I'm not sure. But most of those houses are single story or story and a half on that street, in the immediate neighborhood of where these townhouses could go. So I really think that to give more credible input to the abutters, it would really make me a lot happier if that were a special permit rather than site plan review. And I wish Mr. Tucker already gave me the reasons why it's less intense, blah, blah. Maybe it is less intense, but I think that we still need to have a little bit more power for the neighbors to have input into that that's credible and that is appealable to the court if it really is something that they're not happy with. And one of the reasons I think, another reason that's important is that we keep telling how much flexibility there is in this code, that yes, you have standards, but everybody can figure out what their own standards are, and if they don't like the standards in their book, they can make up their own standards and prove to somebody that they're better. Well, I think the neighbors also need to be in on this process of, is whatever you're proposing up to or better than what's in the form-based code? And I think a special permit rather than site plan review would help that empowerment, and I hope you take that seriously.
Thank you. John?
I'm John Cool, 20 Sherman Lane. I would urge you to go ahead and put this on the warrant for a number of reasons. One, I believe it is complicated, but I don't believe that it is mysterious. I think that its effect can be summed up in some very comforting kinds of language. It is, in fact, the form-based piece of this is, in fact, adding another layer of constraint. And each time you add those layers, then you have to have some public process attached to it, and that simply follows. The other thing that I would like to do is counter some of the kind of old standard arguments that we occasionally hear at town meeting. And those are, why are we always changing? Well, that's something that zoning does. It always changes to meet changing needs. We're not unique in that. And every town's zoning bylaw grows and grows until somebody comes in and really excises a bunch of stuff, and that's a costly process in and of itself. We actually manage in our housekeeping to do quite a good job of excising things piece by piece as we see the contradictions and redundancies. The don't understand, that's not an argument either. Certainly there are things about any number of our bylaws, and that has not to do with just zoning, but some behavioral ones as well, of course, that you don't understand the intricacies of, but you understand the purpose of. And I don't think it's difficult for people to understand the purpose of this. We've also heard that you're not making some zoning that will keep students out. And of course, you've responded intelligently to that, and as did Mr. Cecil in the evening that he was presenting here. You can't zone out a class of people. You can zone to encourage a kind of dwelling, and you can hope that that kind of dwelling encourages the kind of occupant that you'd like to see. But that's all you can do with zoning, and you can't expect to do more. I think we have a need for this form-based zoning because it is the way that we can preserve the character of our town and of our village centers. I think that we have a need to expose this concept to town, well, I should say expose town meeting to this concept because voted up or down, it's something, it's virtually inevitable, I believe. And one of the other things to keep in mind is what a useful tool it could be, or if you wish, could have been, when it came to things like the often referred to Kentucky Fried Bank of of Bank of America at Triangle Street, which is just, that fits no form, no expectation of a village center look or any other look whatsoever. It would be more properly found on a busy Route 9. Or another thing is the situation in North Amherst, where we have a very awkward little strip plaza, and access is sort of, well, you got to figure it out when you get there, and parking is sort of, well, you got to figure that out when you get there, and then egress, well, if you're lucky, you'll figure that out when time comes too. But form-based zoning would protect us from some of these anomalies that simply don't make sense and don't fit in. So I do hope that you will put it forward and it will have a fair hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments from the public? Sir?
Yuri Fryman, town meeting member, precinct 10. I just want to use as a starting point a comment someone, I think it was Rob, made that this form-based code will not change current zoning, but will supplement it. And I think any fears that people have about what form-based code will do to our zoning rules, it will only add to it and make it more positive. It won't change the current zoning. And I really want to emphasize that point, at least in my view. That's what I'm understanding. And I believe that form-based code is inherently a positive move in the direction of maintaining the character and the quality of life here in Amherst. And in fact, it probably will increase it because of the nature of what the form-based code is. So I feel quite encouraged by that it will increase the quality and the character of our town. And in addition, by passing the form-based code, it doesn't make it a fait accompli. It still has to go through the process in town of the ZBA, the planning board, public hearings, and most of all, town meeting. And I think when people say people in town meeting won't understand it, well, there's going to be a lot of different levels of understanding of the form-based code in town meeting. That's the nature of town meeting. That's the nature of our town. Some people will understand it more completely. Some people will have a rudimentary understanding of it. And that's how democracy works. And that's how it'll work here in this town. And people will understand it as best they can and vote in that way. And I trust the process of town meeting to move in the direction of, again, increasing the quality and the character of our town. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you. Sir?
John Pittman, 120 Pulpit Hill Road. Lived there for 17 years, and I think, Jonathan, you graduated a few years ahead of me from high school over there, so seen a few things change in town. I'm a very strong advocate of form-based zoning, and I have seen it be very effective. And I was involved in the early 1990s professionally in working with the town of Harwich in Cape Cod to develop form-based zoning, which directly involved the residents of the town in the creation of what the forms were. And through that process, people became much more connected to zoning, to how one can create development or manage development in a way that was much closer to what their image in their own eyes of what development looks like. One of the disconnects in my experience anyway with zoning is that often it says the kind of use, but oftentimes the form is what the mismatch is. This is a support for the town moving forward with form-based zoning, and as someone who lives in North Amherst and has spent a lifetime moving through North Amherst, I keep seeing what goes forward there in terms of forms. And I keep placing forms and reimagining forms there, including things like street trees, for example, because it helps to recreate our sense of enclosure and space in terms of how we think about streetscapes and things like that. So So I'm speaking here wearing several hats, one resident, one someone who's been professionally involved in form-based zoning, and I have seen it clarify the meaning of zoning as opposed to mystify the form of zoning, and I've seen it be an enhancement to zoning, particularly in the Cape, which is very, very politically charged around zoning. Zoning, I very strongly support. I was very heartened to see the town moving in the direction of form-based zoning. I see it as an asset. I wish that my life at the moment would allow me to be more involved, but happy to talk with anyone about some of my experiences in developing that. Thank you.
Thank you. There was someone in the middle, yes.
Elisa Rubenstein. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 10, and I've been coming to a few of these meetings because as a relatively new town meeting member, although I served for 10 years about 20 years ago, I'm trying to understand all of this, and I was hoping that more progress was made at the zoning subcommittee hearings and going through this, because I was really interested in hearing them discuss Section 16. And then tonight, I heard that more work has to be done between now and town meeting on this. Is that correct? So I'm really concerned because town meeting starts on November 7th. So if more work is going to be done between now and then, when are town meeting members going to receive a thoroughly vetted and final draft of this form-based code and these zoning changes? I'm saying this because in the past some zoning has been brought forth that did not go down well in town meeting, and I'm wondering if this is going to be a repetition of what happened last year and other years. So I'm just guess it's my reaction as a town meeting member right now and being concerned that I'm going to understand every little bit before it comes to town meeting on November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response?
Can I answer that? Sure. That's a very good question. And in terms of the process between now and town meeting, the answer is basically that the warrant will be signed, which means finalized, on Friday of this week, just a couple days from now. And so what goes in the warrant, the official version of the article, will be essentially what you have in your hands there right now, plus the changes. We made some changes earlier tonight at our meeting, so it will include those changes. That will be the warrant article language that will go to town meeting, and all the town meeting members will receive that in their packets. It will be available on the website. Anything that changes after that point has to be, by the rules of town meeting, it has to be what they say within the scope of the article, which means that it can't propose doing more than what's in the published version in the warrant. It can do less, but it can't do more. So basically any changes at that point will be limitations and reductions. They won't be additions. So in terms of your ability or anyone's ability to read and understand and figure out what it all says and what it all means, the version that we have right now is the governing, essentially core version of what we're talking about. If things change between now and town meeting, they'll be very much around the edges. We don't have any ability after today, basically, to go in and make substantial changes to it.
So even though you say more work needs to be done, this has to be signed by Friday,
Yes.
and so more work is not going to be done.
Nothing will happen between now and Friday apart from the incorporation of changes that we made at our zoning subcommittee meeting earlier today. We will continue to meet and discuss it between now and town meeting. What we can do if we want to make changes at town meeting is make an amended motion, which means move to adopt the packet that you have in front of you there, but with certain changes to it. We intend to limit the number of things that we put there, because that gets big and complicated too if you try to make too many changes. But any changes there would be brought up at town meeting and they would be discussed there, and they would be part of the motion that we brought at town meeting. But none of that can or would include major changes to the structure of the article. The structure of the article is fixed at this point, and we can't really tinker with large portions of it.
I wish you luck.
I would just note that there were also some changes made at the subcommittee on Monday. There will be a small list of changes so that what goes into the warrant, which you will receive copies of, will be slightly different than what is before you now, what is in your hand now. But that will be, as was described, the final draft to be understood and discussed and so forth.
Further comment?
I just know that pleas have been made to educate town meeting members, and those who've been trying to educate themselves kind of feel like changes keep being made. And it's valuable to make those changes and have all of the changes made before it goes to town meeting, instead of proposing changes on the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, and we do recognize that.
Ma'am?
Nina Chandler I live on Summer Street. I was just confused. I think I'm confused by something Rob said. And that was that Rob said there would be no substantial change in the zoning, but in current zoning, but rather the form-based standards would overlie current zoning. And my understanding is that the zoning would actually change quite a bit and allow for considerably more residences, whereas now the whole of the Cowles property, you know, the old mill, is commercially zoned, that a very, very substantial part of that would become residential, and residential high-density zoning. And to me, as someone who lives in the neighborhood, that isn't an overlay of form on the current zoning. To me, an overlay of form, a form-based zoning on the current zoning, would mean that that would all remain commercial, but that it would have to meet certain standards for every development, not that it would become high-density residential. So.
Rob, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. I apologize for the misunderstanding. What I mean is that we would retain our current conventional way of zoning things. The actual zone in North Amherst would change if this were to pass. But we would still have the same kind of zoning, but we would also have form-based zoning.
Mr. Tucker?
I think there's also a misconception about what's possible or not possible under current zoning. Under current zoning in the commercial zoning district, if you read through the use chart, it is possible to do a mixed use with business uses on the first floor and quite intense residential uses on upper floors. The difference is there would be no control over the form of that under the commercial zoning that is there now, and my understanding is the property owners have held off making changes until the community had a chance to decide what it wanted the form of its village center to be. So if you're making a comparison between the existing zoning and the proposed zoning, between the commercial district, for instance, for the area you were discussing, and the North Amherst Village Center form-based district, the density would be about the same, to 12 to 13 to 14 units an acre. The difference would be you would have control over the form that density takes, and it would work much better within the village center context. So that there is not a significant or meaningful increase in density going from the current zoning to the proposed zoning. What you're achieving is a much better end product.
Mr. Kelly?
Larry Kelly, 596 South Pleasant Street, South Amherst, lifelong resident of the town and former small business owner in South Amherst for 28 years. relatively close to Atkins. I would urge the board to not only move this forward by putting it on the warrant article, but I would also ask you and urge you to take a separate vote supporting it and telling town meeting to support it. Because as you know, there's a huge hurdle that this is going to face on the floor of town meeting, which is a good thing because zoning is forever, but it's a 2/3 vote. And I'm thinking, you know, as an ARA member, I first saw this yesterday, and I'm not speaking for the ARA, and neither did Mr. Cool earlier tonight, but he can back me up on this. The first I saw this was yesterday at 5 o'clock at the ARA meeting. It was sitting, waiting for me, and I took one look at it. The cover was pretty, but I looked at this and went, oh my goodness, this is going to be the parking garage revisited here. This is not good. And then Mr. Tucker took 3.5, maybe 4 minutes giving us a Monarch Notes version of what's in here. And I got it. I got it. I got enough of it to support it. And I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So I think over the next month, there's plenty of time. I mean, the people who support this will take a microscope and they'll go through it, and I promise I'll read this over the next 3 or 4 weeks for sure. But people who support it are going to read it carefully and put out material as to why it should be passed. And people who oppose it, and we know there'll be a lot of those, they're going to put it under a microscope and put out their material. And that's what, you know, town meeting is all about. So we have plenty of time to vet this between now and town meeting, and it sure is going to get a proper vetting on the floor of town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Ma'am?
Janet Keller, 120 Pulpit Hill Road. One thing that I would hope that we could see before this comes to town meeting is examples of the form-based codes that apply to a small town. Zoning does indeed change a lot, and in the 100 or plus years that we've had it, people are constantly trying to tinker with it to make it better. And I understand form-based code is something that people like the Lincoln Land Institute have tried to use to give flexibility and some design guidance. Not an easy thing to do. I also understand that it's been used a lot more in urban settings. It would give me more ease with what seems to be going forward to see where such a code had been applied successfully to a small town, town that has maybe a big university in it, that may be asking too much, to a small town that has a very precious set of resources in the historic buildings that we have in or near the core of the North Amherst Village Center. And I've not been able to find any to date, so that's something that, in addition to the transportation concerns not being addressed concurrently, and I understand that's outside of the zoning, but it still is a cause for discomfort. You've got a very big change going on here, something I think there's a lot of agreement we need to do something about over here with the transportation. They need to come together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you for that comment. And just to address that and to address some of the other questions and comments people have had about how are they going to understand this and how can anyone understand this big, long document? We totally recognize the fact that we need to do a lot of outreach in terms of educating people in terms of how this works, what it does, what the impacts would be, and we intend to have a session that's focused entirely on explaining this to the community before town meeting. And so I think that will go a long way toward answering people's questions about what it is and how it works. And an important component of that absolutely would be the examples that Ms. Keller just asked about. The fact is that form-based code, while it is kind of cutting edge in a sense in that it's a lot more modern and up to date than the zoning concepts that we've been using for a long time. It's not brand new, and there are a lot of communities around New England and around the country that have successfully implemented it. So we certainly can and will give examples of other towns and their experience with it, large and small. I'm not sure that we could find another town in Massachusetts with a large land-grant university that successfully implemented form-based code. But there are other towns in Massachusetts. There are other small towns. There's other ones in New England. There has been a lot of work done with it, and we can certainly give people some visibility into what the outcomes have been.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe.
Nils LaCour, North Whitney Street. Saratoga Springs, town, about 25,000 people. Historic downtown. One of the posters I made during the master plan process was a sort of streetscape in their very historic downtown, which is the new building under this zoning. And it was really only the architects that could tell the certain brickwork. They could really figure out what was the new building. So that's a good example with 2 colleges in the downtown. So I urge you to take a look at that. What I really want to do with my comments tonight were sort of give a sense of urgency in that we've waited long enough for this kind of zoning changes, and a sense of importance to this zoning change. The idea of the village center surrounded by protected open space has been a very strong concept in planning in the town of Amherst since 1973 SCOG report. And there's a wonderful little map with the village centers surrounded by open space. And we've done an incredible job of protecting open space. And at conferences, I was always happy to brag, my town, you know, over 30% of our land mass is protected, permanently protected open space. I can go on 50 miles of hiking trails the Conservation Commission maintains. I mean, that's part of what really makes this town great. It also means that over 50% of our land mass is either not taxed or taxed at below market rate. That puts a heck of a tax burden on the rest of it, which is what makes these village centers so precious. If we're going to continue to protect our open space and rural character, then these village centers are where we can do what we need to do to provide all of the services and the housing services and everything that our 3 great educational institutions need to survive and thrive in this world. So that's why this is really important. And that's part of the reason that as a planner, when I'm working for the town, in 2004, I started exploring form-based code and ended up getting a smart growth technical assistant grant from the state to extend our contract with our master planner to take a look at this. And they did an urban form analysis. Unfortunately, we didn't get to incorporate it into the master planning process as much as we would have liked, but we knew that it was a really great concept because what it does is make the whole development process a lot more predictable for everybody. The neighborhood and the town is involved in developing what that form should be, what's the appropriate form for a particular area, so they understand what could be coming down the road. There's also the developer gets a much better picture of what the product is that they need to provide, and so they can work within that. It just makes the whole process much more predictable for everybody involved. And so that's why I've been a very big proponent of form-based code since the mid-2000s. So this is not a new concept. It's been around for a while, and having been the project manager for the master plan in the town, I would like to think that I probably spent more time than anybody else going over the data, all the stuff that we heard from the community. And first and foremost, we want to protect rural character and open space. And secondly, we need and want more density in our village centers. And so that's why in some ways I cringe the fact that we aren't going a little farther out with some of the zoning around the village centers. And we did some planning studies that actually, you know, put the lines of the village centers out because so much of our land is already either protected open space, partially protected open space,
and, you know, isn't providing us the tax revenues that we need. And that's part of what really motivates me as both a planner and a person is trying to, how can we figure out how to create the best community possible? And, you know, while I get frustrated with the fact that this is such a huge, thick document, when you really look at it, it's a pretty simple context. I mean, most of it's about the pictures. We've decided this is what the form is, and, you know, all the sort of other language is in there, has to be in there just to describe the situation. So that's part of the reason why I have faith in our professional staff and our very competent planning board, because none of the zoning is going to approve any project. That still requires discretion and guidance from our professional staff and our competent planning board. So that's why I am certainly willing to, you know, urge you to move ahead with this very important evolution of our zoning in town. Because, you know, one of the frustrating things was that concept of the village centers and protected open space came out in 1973. Unfortunately, the zoning bylaw that I had to work with for almost 12 years that came out of that was a reaction to all the terrible schlocky development we got in town in the 60s and 70s when UMass expanded from 6,000 students to 25,000 students. I understand why people got really upset about that. I understand why people don't like all the big student parties all over the place. I mean, we can do better. We can do better, but we need to do something, because doing nothing is going to give us a lot more of the same. And that's why I really see this as a great opportunity for the community to move forward. And having been a planner, having fielded a lot of phone calls of people that want to come in and invest in this community, I can tell you that people will want to come in and invest in this community and make it better. So please move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Ma'am?
I apologize, first of all, for not having my thoughts together, because there's so many. I suppose I have a question.
Could you
first.
please identify
I'm so
yourself
sorry.
for the record?
Melissa Perot. I'm on Summer Street. First of all, I'm confused about the idea that the original zoning still exists and the form-based goes on top of it. We have, in fact, got two new zoning categories, the NAVC and the AC. So there is new zoning. My question is, why wasn't the form-based put on top of the old zoning? Why was it necessary to have new zoning categories? Can you just answer that one for me?
I can speak to parts of that. The zoning that was in place in North Amherst in particular is what is currently, because it's still in place there now, not well suited to the development of a vibrant, robust, livable village center. A huge portion of the area north of the North Amherst Village Center is zoned commercial. Commercial is our most intense, retail-oriented, strip mall-oriented zoning district that we have on our books. That's all the way up Sunderland Road, along Cowles Road, is zoned commercial. Commercial is what we, in Hadley, that would be Route 9, would be commercial zoning. That's the most intense zoning district that we have. That's about the least appropriate zoning district that I could imagine for the area immediately adjacent to a village center. It doesn't promote healthy residential use. It doesn't promote healthy retail use. If you were going to put a Walmart in Amherst, the only place that you could put it is in a commercial zone. I'm not saying that Walmart would go there, but I'm saying that that's what commercial zoning is for. It's for sort of car-friendly, real intense commercial activity.
But with the form base on top of it.
Right, so then you'd have nice-looking sprawl and strip malls and all the other things that you could put
or
in.
businesses and retail and offices with apartments above. And looking very nice with some greenery in between and a pathway down to the stream.
Right, but you'd still have, the underlying zoning would be commercial.
Yes,
and
but
I mean,
these other uses would be permitted. We don't have to have a heliport, you know. I think Mr. Tucker said that we could have the same density with the commercial, the existing zoning, as there was with the
what
with
Mr.
the new
Tucker
zoning.
described was the density that would be allowed under mixed-use residential development, which is the only residential development that would be allowed in the commercial district. That
Right.
It prohibits, actively
Very good.
prohibits
Very good.
every other type of residential zoning.
Yes. And
So-
why would that not be appropriate right next to the core of the village?
Because of all the other things that are also allowed there. Commercial, I mean, take a look through the use table in the zoning
Yes, I
bylaw
did.
and look
I
at
did.
all the things that are allowed in the.
And I've also listened to Cinda, and she's made it quite clear that that's not what she wants to do.
Right, so-
And that there is, in fact, potential for having the kind of density that the town wants, the kinds of businesses and retail that the neighborhood wants in that commercial area. And I didn't understand the need to make a whole new zoning district out of it in order, I think what you're saying is in order to prevent the heliport, which wasn't going to happen.
Well, so no, the heliport is not an important aspect of anybody's decision-making, but your question was, why didn't we retain the existing zoning? And my answer is that the existing zoning allows for a broad range of activities that we felt would not be appropriate to the area immediately outside a village center. Commercial is just inherently incompatible with the village center. We don't have that type of zoning anywhere else downtown. And so that's why we felt that a new zoning district that allowed uses that we felt would be appropriate in that area would be much more appropriate and relevant than a zoning district that allowed a whole broad range of uses that might be very objectionable in that area.
It's very strange because actually what the charrette indicated was that we did want businesses and retail, and we were fine with apartments on top of businesses, mixed use. We were not objecting to form base. And so it's all available with the existing zoning. And so that's why I'm confused about that. And also, I'd like to ask, for my own sake, I suppose, because I'm new to this whole town meeting process, how should we present a case to the subcommittee or to the town meeting so that we get understood? We keep being told that we have been heard and that changes have been made, i.e. our RN community has now been changed to RVC. We don't feel that's being heard. Over and over again in the charrette, we agreed 7, 14, I don't know how many dots it had against it, but there was a clear consensus. And to override that, I just don't understand. I know there are conflicting people who want to use the land differently, but there is a large consensus of people who wanted to leave it as it was. And I don't understand how to get heard, and if this kind of thing comes up again, and people want to express and be heard in a way, I don't know what else can be done. I mean, the charrette it was a nonsense to me because it hasn't happened. It isn't reflected in what you have now. It is not at all reflected. It was a community getting together, having an idea of a whole, not of a whole lot of building and rezoning things, but of a whole community. And a community is so much more than the buildings and the uses that you put on it, even the feel and look of them. It is so much more than that. And what North Amherst wants is a community again, not buildings with particular form basis on them. And I think we achieved that in the charrette. We came together, and there were different viewpoints, and they seem to mesh in this belief in the core of North Amherst and in the potential for real community, not transient people, and people who live there and work there and who don't have to get in their car to go to Hadley in order to get their groceries, who have a place to have their coffee with other neighborhood people. We want that. We want it in the core of Amherst, down below the river, right there. And we want mixed uses where on the Coles property, splendid. Nothing wrong with that. And that's what we were saying at the charrette, and it doesn't seem to be reflected in what's happening now. Sorry.
Mr. Tucker.
One of the, and I do not mean to be condescending when I say this, one of the very real differences between planning law and developed growth management law in the United States and in Great Britain is the degree of control over what future uses can be. In both Massachusetts and the United States in general, there is profound protection for the rights of individual property owners to do with their property whatever the general rules allow, and you cannot, through those general rules, foreclose too many options. What you can do is guide. I think that those who have participated in the process so far, and I believe this is true of the subcommittee, and they can speak to this, believe that to the degree possible, the zoning that is being presented here and will be tinkered with on the margins as we go forward does in fact, to the degree possible, achieve what it is that you're describing in terms of a village center. I think there's,
It doesn't.
well,
Mr. Tucker, I'm sorry, it doesn't. It does.
it's
because I'm
not,
talking- no,
it is
I'm
not,
talking
as I have said
community.
before, and I'll say this once more and I'll stop so
Sorry.
it doesn't get
Didn't interrupt
argumentative,
you.
that there is not unanimity of opinion in North Amherst about what North Amherst Village Center should be. There is considerable consensus on much of it, but there is not unanimity of opinion. And what zoning must do is balance everybody's needs. And that's what this attempts to do. It does not completely meet anyone's needs. It meets most needs in the best way it can. And it does the least, and always attempts to do the least damage that it can to people's interests and hopes and aspirations. But when you have hopes and aspirations and interests that are in conflict, as they are anywhere in this town, you put a bulldog pin on a part of the map of Amherst and draw a 300-foot circle around it, and I will find you utter disagreement within that 300-foot circle about what the future of that area should be, unless we're talking about the cows or whatever. But you know what I mean. This is a balancing that we have been doing here for 350 years in this valley, and it is never perfect in terms of the results for any one interest group. It tries to accomplish as much as it can for all of those who live there and want to live there and will live there in the future.
Well, I guess I'll say it again. I don't think it's balanced. I think the development is having its way, and that the people who want to retain a residential community and have a community sense, and I believe the developers actually were initially very keen on that too. I don't think we're in conflict with that. It's just that the zoning is not reflecting what we were asking for. And I think it could have been achieved without having to change the zoning on Montague or indeed on the commercial property. I think a great deal could be done that would be very beneficial to the village. And I would hope that the core part of the village could also be revived, if not with the help of the town, with the help of the community members who care about the actual community, the people, not the buildings, not the roads, the people. So sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sir?
If I can just ask her from here.
No, could you please come up to the microphone?
Gary Fryman, Precinct 10. I wonder if Mr. Tucker would be willing to give us the 3 or 4 minute elevator speech that you gave that was so convincing to Larry Kelly not only to the people in this room, but the people who will be watching it on TV, and that might really have some clarification.
Unfortunately, that performance was not recorded, so I'm not sure I can reproduce it exactly. I can.
Do please try.
I will try. I can speak to it in a number of ways. First, that, as was said earlier, what this does is not change the fundamental way in which zoning operates. It does, as several people have pointed out, create new zoning districts, one fundamental zoning district for North Amherst, one fundamental zoning district for Atkins Corners, and it creates overlay districts around the periphery of both of those fundamental districts on either residential areas in North Amherst or on the educational district at Atkins Corners. But what it is doing is not changing the fundamental way in which the zoning operates. We still have regulation of uses. We still have regulation of dimensions. We still have regulation of parking and signs and all of the other things that zoning does. None of that is going away. What we are doing is adding a layer of regulation for the form-based districts only that regulates the form of development as it proceeds. And that was described earlier by Mr. O'Keefe, that it addresses things like street types, buildings, and this is what zoning can do. Zoning does not tell the community how to live its life. Zoning addresses the physical aspects of and the uses in the way that land is developed and used. That's what zoning does. There are other ways in which those other things can be addressed, but that's not what zoning by itself can do. The community itself must step up to do other things. So we are adding this layer of form regulation on top of what we already use. The rest of it is not new. The rest of it is something we have been using since 1925, which is when zoning was first adopted in Amherst. The proposed amendment does several basic things. First, it creates a new section, an Article 16, that would create general regulations for form-based activity in any form-based district either being proposed now or in the future. So there's this general category being created in the bylaw that will address form as Amherst goes forward. Within that section, there are some small subsections that address specific aspects or specific criteria being applied to North Amherst, to certain aspects of North Amherst, and to Atkins Corners, and that address form uniquely because both those two areas are profoundly different from one another. The history of architecture, where it exists, it certainly exists in North Amherst. It barely exists in Atkins Corners. Much of that is almost a new development. It is addressed in different ways, but those are specific to those specific areas. The districts that have been described are created. What I'm describing is what the article that would be on the town meeting warrant would do. It's creating these 4 new districts, which I already described. As Mr. O'Keefe said earlier, there are also some changes to existing zoning districts, some shifts in those existing districts around the edges of the new districts in order to make that make more sense. And then there are the revisions to the rest of the bylaw. Every time we make a major change to the zoning bylaw, it's like a pile of pickup sticks. You move one piece, the rest of it shifts, and you have to make references in any number of other sections of the bylaw and some minor amendments to make it all make sense together. And finally, what it's doing is Article 12 of the zoning bylaw, which is the section that creates definitions, which tells the rest of the bylaw what the words that it's using mean. There are quite a number of new terms being defined there, most of which have to do with the form-based regulation. In 2 instances, we are either amending or creating new definitions for residential uses. For townhouses, there's an existing very vague definition. We are improving that definition so that it makes sense and is distinct from other kinds of housing. And we are creating a new definition, never had one before, for apartments. again, a physical description rather than description of who occupies the dwelling units or whatever. That's the fundamental layout of the changes that are occurring. Others have already made representations about what those changes mean, and I won't attempt that, but that's my recollection of the 3 to 4 minute Cliff Notes version of what I told the Redevelopment Authority.
Thank you. Any more comments from the public? Sir, in the back.
Phil Gosselin, Summer Street. I'm not really qualified to speak about this form or about form-based zoning, but I do live in the neighborhood, and I can see that I did attend the Cecil Group summer thing, and I thought it was a sham. So obviously something that costs the taxpayers a bunch of money, and it allows people to say, we asked for your opinion, we got the opinions, but clearly it served other purposes, which is that, in effect, when this new zoning goes in effect, it will give developers a kind of a carte blanche, particularly along Montague Road. This, if you look at it carefully, you'll see that the houses there have a particularly salutary effect in terms of how it deals with the mini mall below it and how it deals with the park. And if you do this, the present changes, the apartment buildings that go in will totally change that neighborhood. And all of the plans, and we've seen a variety of different plans, people are throwing out plans left and right, some of which would cost the town a huge amount of money, some of which would be, perhaps unsuccessful, and even though things like senior centers and ice cream parlors sound great, who could object to that? In reality, it's going to be a lot of things that look similar to the mini mall that we have now. So I think that really this is pretty important. People are saying, oh, there's either we've got lots of time, don't worry about it, then we'll find out later, oh yeah, well, you had your say. Or there's other people presented, there's a great urgency, there's this great opportunity. We can't let this opportunity go by. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And if you don't take it, a Walmart will go up there, or a junkyard will go there, or something like, you've got trouble here in River City and only we can save you. So I think that you should re-look at this, what the effect of this is going to be. Because it sounds wonderful, it looks wonderful, but the effect, particularly on Montague Road, will be destabilizing for the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you. In the back, please, ma'am. Be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Barbara Puffer, 85 Montague Road. In fact, Barbara Puffer, 64 Montague Road, 72 Montague Road, 82 Montague Road. The charrette, to me, was a very excellent idea on your part. I participated. I heard lots of opinions, and I was encouraged by it because I wanted the opportunity one day to participate in getting North Amherst back to the way I remember it when I was a kid. Melissa is very right. We hung out together. There was a bank with real people taking care of you. The post office was open for more than 15 minutes a day. We had hairdressing salons. We had a marvelous gift store that was sort of like the 10,000 villages at the top. And underneath, it was a Christmas store. And I would love to get back to that sort of a service over at, I think it's 65 Montague Road. In any case, what I am interested in is an aspect that we don't talk about enough. My taxes are sky high, and I bet you yours are too. If we allow controlled projects that are vetted by the town, by the neighbors, and by form-based code, there is a very good chance of getting something good. I worked for the United Nations for 20 years, so if there's somebody who should be jaded about bureaucracy, it's me, and I am not. I think that our family has done very good things for this town. The town got a pond It's worth millions of dollars now. You got a recreation area that is worth way, way more than you paid for it. Our family gives back to the town because they have given us the chance to do business here, and we worked our butts off, and that's how we did it. I would love very much for the Mill River Recreation Area to be connected from the park through Montague Road to Sunderland Road. That could happen through our properties. I would love to have other little services on our property, if that were possible. If it's not possible, you know, it's not going to kill me, but I think it would be an enhancement, just like Melissa said. I know what she means. I know what she means about European village centers and how people hang out together. That was the North Amherst I grew up in, and that's what I would advocate. I love the idea of a pocket neighborhood, very controlled, like Jonathan said. More than single-family homes, but something that feels cozy, sorry for the word, but that is around a green. I love the idea of having a river walk for you people, not for me, because the river gives me the creeps, all right? The river gives me the creeps. But if you want to have boardwalks and all that stuff, I'm very willing to facilitate that. And mixed use and clusters seem to me a good way to go. So I really did want to stand up and say what North Amherst used to be like. I went to the charrette. I'm not deaf, and I've spent my life negotiating and doing diplomacy with people who are sometimes very, very grumpy, and sometimes people who are very, very forward-looking and would be willing to do it again. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ma'am. In the green.
Paola Di Stefano, Montague Road. I'm a 17-year resident of Amherst, and I would just like to corroborate what Melissa said and what Phil Goslin said. I was at the charrette. I've been at many of these meetings. I appreciate that we do have a chance to speak, but I don't feel that any of our concerns have been addressed by this new zoning. I think that the new zoning will absolutely ruin what is a precious and much-loved neighborhood, and I don't think there's any reason for that. When I look at this zoning map, to me it looks like it's reflecting the special interests of just a few people. The overwhelming majority of neighbors who actually live in the neighborhood would like Montague Road to remain residential. And I don't understand, with all this space possible and all this development possible, why you have to take what is a thriving, wonderful community and change it so greatly. That's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to a couple of the comments along the lines of Montague Road remaining residential. And I know that everybody has their own opinions about what it should look like specifically, but I do want to point out that the proposed zoning here keeps Montague Road residential. We've gone through great pains to try to keep it that way. We recognize that we've been told that over and over again. The proposed zoning along the portion of Montague Road north of the Mill River is RVC, Village Center Residential. That's a zoning district that is residential. It allows very limited types of commercial and retail uses, but to a very, very limited extent. It's a residential zoning district. It's a residential zoning district that we have in many other parts of town. And you can drive through or ride your bike through areas that are zoned RVC today and form your own opinion of whether or not they're residential. So the zoning might not represent everything anyone is looking for. As Mr. Tucker has already pointed out, there's a lot of competing interests at play. But we did hear loud and clear the voice of people that were asking for residential zoning there, and I think the proposal does, in fact, accomplish that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any, Mr. Crowner?
I'm hearing that it's not just residential that people want. It's a specific kind of residential. Is that right? Single family homes. So
I'm sorry, could you please come forward to the microphone?
Plenty of opportunity for development of the Coles property. There's plenty of opportunity for the Garniers to develop their properties on Sunderland Road, which through there. Why can't we just leave Montague Road the way it is, and as RN, with your form-based zoning, leave it as it is, and then we would feel that we had been included in this process and not simply walked over. RVC is not RN. There's a higher density in RVC. There's different kinds of houses that can be built. There's more coverage of the land. Just put the form-based zoning over the RN and leave it at that.
well, the reason that we're proposing RVZ zoning there is because we're thinking of Montague Road as part of the village center. So the village center has particular zones. Now, if you don't like that, you can ask town meeting to reject the zoning. That's the option. What we're saying is, if you want a village center in North Amherst, it includes a business district, it includes a residential district, and it's a specific kind of residential district that includes more people than you might have in single-family lots. That's why we're proposing it like that. So I mean, it's an option that if you don't like, then it should be rejected, obviously.
I'm sorry, I need to ask you to step forward to the microphone if you're going to speak, and please do. Ma'am.
I wonder if what I might say might be helpful. And I can never learn to pull it toward me. And I'm still Janet Keller. But I'd like to walk to the map, if this thing will follow me, and talk a little bit about the folks who put together that vision in the first place that some of you may have seen, and what we were thinking. I don't know if this will help you. It's my hope that it will. We had hoped, as folks are talking, and we're not all sophisticated about zoning. I know a little bit about it, but every time I go to try to talk about it, it trips me up. And we were asking that this be kept, this part right here of the map, be kept in the same character that it is now. And I know a little bit about these folks. And it's a very tight-knit, warm, I'll say it, loving neighborhood. And they've put that love into these houses. Look at the gardens. Look at how they've taken care of them. I've had an old house. They're geldfressers. They eat your money. And these people love the houses, so they've taken exquisite care of them. So here's what we were thinking. We're thinking there is all this room in here that's already got development, and that's what will have Intense Village Center. And we were hoping that this core, as we call it, the civic core, would be revitalized. I've now, here that, and again, and I know that zoning doesn't address that, but we want so much for what Barbara was talking about. Many of us have lived in these villages that really worked and had all these great services and businesses in them. We wanted to protect the flood-prone conservancy. So when I see this much orange, and I think some other folks, or when I see this little piece sticking out into Montague Road, and if this is intensely developed as well, then I go, yeah, threats to the flood-prone conservancy, threats to all this stuff up here that the master plan and the open space and rec plan said was so important to conserve. I mean, that's how we're thinking. I don't know if that's helpful, and we keep forgetting to say we love this stuff down here too, and that they go together. And I'm heartened when Jonathan says the town's working on the North Church and, you know, that sort of thing. But it's very scary if you don't know that the transportation and the historic resources and the natural resources are going to be protected. And I guess that's what I would say. I don't.
Okay. Anyone who hasn't spoken yet like to say a word, ma'am?
It's going to stay. Sarah LaCour, Precinct 9, North Whitney Street. Also work for W.D. Coles in North Amherst. I just wanted to mention a couple of items. I was also at the charrette, and I thought it was a wonderful event, and I thought it was important that everybody got to share ideas. And I did hear that Montague Road should remain residential. I didn't hear single-family residential. I heard residential. And I think that that's what we've all been aiming for, is a residential feel. And that's what the form-based code does. And that's why Cecil Group brought forward the big house, back house, little house, barn scenario or form, which is basically what exists on the west side. I think my concern in terms of hearing we want to see we don't want things to change. Well, unfortunately, the west side of the road is multi-unit housing, primarily students, and that has been a big problem for the neighbors. And we're trying to address that in many ways, but also in zoning. We all know you can't zone for behavior, but you can zone in terms of the types of units and the amount of units. And so I think something has to change along the western side of Montague Road. And I think RVC is an excellent choice because you have the residential component, which everybody wanted and liked at the charrette, but it also provides you the option to add in businesses or perhaps a live-work scenario where you have more owner occupation, which then helps the student issue, but you've preserved your residential character. So that I wanted to offer that. And then in terms of the commercial versus NAVC, the key difference I see there, also as a professional planner, and this is true in my neighborhood on North Whitney Street, under commercial, you're only allowed the residential in the mixed use, in the upper floors of the building. And in the NAVC, you would be allowed townhouses by right. You would not be allowed apartments except under special permit. But there are townhouses in my neighborhood off of North Whitney Street that are wonderful. There's families living there. There's young couples living there. There's singles living there. There's probably students living there. There are also higher density buildings in that neighborhood by the same townhouses. And there are not problems with those either. And this is a quiet neighborhood right off the center of town here. And so the townhouses would be allowed in the new NAVC. And so you'd have a purely residential use that I think would provide a nice dichotomy to a mixed-use building or an office building or retail. And so then you really are getting a mix across your area. So in terms of getting back to the why are we not leaving it existing, to me that's a key piece, that NAVC would allow the townhouse use and that you would get some new interesting looking form, same sort of village, New England vernacular architecture, but in a townhouse form that you wouldn't be required to have commercial on the first floor, which in this current economy would be cost prohibitive for any kind of development there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker.
I'd like to speak very, very quickly to a couple of the concerns that Ms. Keller raised. The orange is out in the vicinity and around the Mill River, so that if a river walk or other public path is created in that area, the form-based regulations would control it. That area is largely floodplain and could not be built on. It has three things. It has wetlands, it has protections under the Rivers Protection Act because it is absolutely a perennial stream, and it has the protections of the 100-year floodplain, which limit the kinds of construction of any kind that can occur there. So in many ways, the land and separate environmental regulations protect that area. In terms of historic fabric, we do not yet have a National Historic Register district, or better still, a local historic district in North Amherst Village, north of the Mill River. But we do have a very strong provision in the existing zoning bylaw called demolition delay, which requires historical commission review of any proposed demolition or significant change to an existing historic building. And the Historical Commission, after holding a public hearing and using the criteria already established in the bylaw, can impose a delay of a year on any demolition while other alternatives are considered. So the town is not without protections already. And again, this is what I was saying before, that what this does is add a layer of form controls on top of a whole strata, if you will, of existing protections in the current bylaw.
Thank you. Sir?
Nils LaCour, North Whitney Street. The map I would really like to have in front of me right now is a map of all the protected open space in town, all the university and college lands. And what that map, that single map, makes you realize is how precious these village centers are. So shrinking them down even further is really tough. I mean, we have the 5th highest tax rate in the state of Massachusetts here. I don't really appreciate that, and it's a big reason why our teachers, our firefighters, and our policemen can't live in this town. Is because they can't afford the property taxes, because we haven't let anything get developed in this town for 30 years, other than a few subdivisions off of that and a few little developments here and there. So what really concerns me is the fact that if we don't allow some more services and housing in this town, our educational institutions, which are the lifeblood of this community, are going to start to suffer. And that's the bigger picture that is your charge to make sure you maintain that whole picture of the whole town. And part of what's been my big motivation to get up and speak tonight was a recent trip to the graduate student offices at the University of Massachusetts, and hearing the stories of all of the visiting the foreign graduate students, the visiting faculty, who come literally in tears to the graduate student offices and say, we can't find a place to live. I mean, these are people who don't have cars, they need to live close to the university. They can't find a place to live because we have not allowed much of anything to happen in this town for 30 years. So that's part of the reason why I want to speak so forcefully to the fact that these village centers are precious. There's a lot of wonderful things that can happen in these village centers. My parents were European. I have a very clear vision of how wonderful it is to be in a very densely packed village center with lots of stuff going on, and then suddenly now you're out in the farmland. And that's what we have the opportunity to create here in Amherst. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rosemary.
There's a land use map, I think, propped up on the back wall, if anybody wants to refer to it.
Land use policy map.
Is that it? Yeah. No, Mr. LaCour was referring to it.
Theoretical.
You couldn't see.
It's at the door pipes.
Maybe we can put it next to the other maps.
Let's put it in front of Akron's corner existing.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rosner.
Front of Atkins
And thank you, Ms. Jones. Yes.
Hilda Greenbaum again, and I would like to respond to, these ideas are all wonderful, but I think we spent the last 5 years in town meeting rezoning all over town. University Drive was one place we rezoned. Research Drive has been rezoned a half a dozen times to accommodate people who wanted to build and start new business. I think Research Drive is one of the few success stories in town where people are actually building a new business. I heard at your last meeting that you approved a lot for the medical center, finally, after many years of that rezoning. Another thing, we heard all about how vital the village center around College Street and Southeast Street was. And we spent a lot of time discussing how that was going to be, and wonderful stores with housing on top. Lo and behold, I'm driving down Route 9 and this big brick building is going in. Well, that's where the money is going. The man who owns the property I understood that we were rezoning for on Southeast Street is building in Hadley. Why? Because you don't have all of these regulations that make it so expensive to build in Amherst. And once you've built this expensive building, and I look in and I see, oh, you can't have plastic fences. Oh, you can't have vinyl siding. There are so many requirements under the form-based code. It looks to me like it's going to be a very expensive building to build. So, yeah, you want more taxes, it's going to be a very expensive building when you go to assess it. So, who is going to want to come here and build one of these buildings when they can do it and pay half the taxes and half the cost in Hadley without all the regulations? And you know what Route 9 looks like. We don't want it to look like Route 9, but that's where the growth is going, because it's more affordable. So who's going to be able to afford to pay rents in very expensive new apartments are going to be? I know a little bit about what the rent structure is in town, and I know that my rents have been flat for at least 10 years, but I don't have tenant problems because they're affordable. So you're going to have expensive buildings. The only people that's going to be able to afford them is groups of students. You're talking about young faculty coming here, graduate students coming here. They can't afford to live in an apartment, a two-bedroom apartment that costs $1,200 a month or more, if you're lucky to be able to build one for that price and pay the price of oil on top of it. That's the reality in this town. We keep rezoning, and we're not bringing business in. I've had empty space now for about 5 years for any kind of a tenant that wants a chemistry lab or anyone else you can do with 6,000 feet. It's still empty. No, UMass isn't building in Amherst. UMass is sending their people to Springfield. They're rehabbing Springfield and filling up all old mill buildings in Springfield and Indian Orchard. They're not coming to Amherst. Somebody's got to work on that problem, but I think part of it is the more regulation. I'm turning into a Tea Partier, a liberal, democratic Tea Partier, but government regulations are getting in the way, and I think we do have to look at the form base carefully and see, do we really need to control the kind of siding that goes on a building so carefully, and the roof heights and the cell holes that make them so expensive to build that the only thing you're going to get is student housing out of it? That's what I want to say. That's the problem, and I love all these wonderful visions, but I just don't see it happening. No matter how much rezoning, nothing so far is happening, and you have a beautiful big brick building going up in Hadley. That's where the investment that I thought was going to be on Southeast Street with houses and stores is building another, I think it's another lube station.
It's a Firestone.
Huh?
It's going to be a Firestone.
It looks like a Firestone. It looks like a fire station for 6 engines or whatever. But that's the reality of life, and I don't know what anybody can do about it. But make it easier for people who want to come here.
Thank you, Ms. Greenbaum. Any further comments from the public? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Excuse me. I don't think you should close.
I'll move to continue the hearing. Don't we want to continue this to 2 weeks from tonight?
I thought it was going to be a separate hearing.
Well, I noticed this has been advertised as a hearing for both North Amherst and Atkins Corner.
The intention was that we would continue it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I move to continue it to, what's the date? 2 weeks?
The 19th.
19th?
Second.
No, today's the 3rd?
5th.
5th.
Oh, today's the 5th.
No, today's the 5th.
Yes, 5th.
Does that mean in 2 weeks, North Amherst will be open for discussion, or will it just be about Atkins?
We will be, the primary focus of the meeting 2 weeks from now will be on the Atkins Corner.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Tonight was an open house for the Wildwood School, and many people in the community that are young families who have children in elementary school were anticipating being able to come to the meeting in 2 weeks from now to discuss North Amherst. I think they would feel a little disappointed if that option was closed.
As time permits, we'll certainly try to allow for that.
They should probably be notified of that change.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second.
Speaking to it, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Since it was advertised tonight for both North Amherst and Atkins Corners, I don't think that it's possible really to preclude anybody from speaking about Atkins Corners. Just like 2 weeks from now, I don't think that we could technically preclude anyone from speaking about North Amherst. But I think we're asking people to recognize that we have two distinct sections of town that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Mr. Rosnoy. Any further discussion among the board?
Do you want to bring up that thing about Atkins, the map?
Okay, we'll bring it to a vote. All in favor of continuing the public hearing till October 19th?
Direction was sufficient.
None opposed or abstaining. Thank you.
Are you going to go and email Cecil Group?
Does the board wish to deliberate further on this at the moment? Or shall we move on to other matters? Any opinion on that? Mr. O'Keefe?
So I guess the only thing that I would offer is to just ask the board whether it's a consensus or an actual vote, whether you're in agreement with what I outlined earlier in terms of the process for going forward to town meeting. In other words, do you support us putting this on the warrant? Do you support moving ahead with it? Because that's a decision that if the board didn't agree with us and you wanted it pulled from the warrant or you wanted us to slow down, that's a decision that needs to be made before the warrant gets signed this Friday. So if we wanted to endorse by consensus or vote on the idea of putting it on the warrant and moving ahead with it, that would be a helpful, useful thing, if that's what the board in fact feels.
Mr. Crowner?
I'd also like to point out that the zoning subcommittee has not yet taken a vote on asking this board to recommend the article. So we're just asking you to continue with the process, and we'll take a vote on whether we want to recommend the article at a later date, presumably in 2 weeks.
Mr. Rosnoy?
As much as I think it's important to move forward, and I hear the arguments that a lot of time has been spent, and there are urgent needs to address. I just feel uncomfortable with the timing on this. This is a public hearing at which a document was presented to the public for public comment, and yet we heard that earlier tonight some changes were made to that document. And I can understand that there are enough changes that, and not enough time, that we couldn't have a list of what those changes were from the zoning subcommittee to the document that was presented to the public in the public hearing. So we've just concluded a part of a public hearing in which people are commenting on a document which is admittedly not even complete as presented to them. So I'm uncomfortable with that for starters. And then I'm somewhat uncomfortable with the fact that we're asking staff and the town to move forward with a warrant article when the public hearing is still open. Maybe I'm an old-fashioned type, but I like to see things happen in the proper sequence. And the proper sequence to me would be the zoning subcommittee finishes their work on the article, presents it to the planning board. Planning board holds a public hearing on that article as the public sees it. The public offers comments. Perhaps the planning board then makes changes to the article, and whatever is finalized is then presented for a town warrant article. So I'm a bit uncomfortable with it. And I recognize, I'd also like to put on the record, which didn't get in the record, that one of the members of the zoning subcommittee who was not here tonight did specifically recommend that this particular issue be not put on the fall town meeting warrant, but be held over so that it can be finalized and be the subject of a special town meeting sometime this winter. All of those comments, notwithstanding my strong desire to move forward with this project in the conceptual form it currently exists.
Thank you, Mr. Roswell. Mr. Schreiber.
So I have a slightly different view that despite the imperfection, I think I would rather see this move forward. And, you know, with the whatever indicators or whatever clauses we need to put in that the board, that the planning board, you know, even if the zoning committee had not made the recommendation, we put those disclaimers in the warrant. Because I think that while the process has been imperfect, really zoning itself is imperfect. And I think that really what the proposed document is better than, well, in my opinion, it's better than what's there now, which is also imperfect. So I would prefer this imperfect process to one that is even less perfect. So I support the goal of moving ahead with getting this on the warrant for Friday and then doing revisions through whatever the proper process is once we fully vet it here. So it's really out of our control that the deadline is really pretty early for, you know, this is the town meeting process. And so rather than delaying something for 6 months, I would rather, you know, for the next set of, or whatever I would rather see it go on the fall town meeting and have it be debated on the floor, get the sense of what the town meeting is, than to try to make a perfect document, which will never happen.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. And Mr. Rosnoy mentioned that one of our members is not with us today. He couldn't be present. Bruce Carson sent the following email. He would like to stress that he recommends very strongly that we delay presenting the proposed zoning changes for both North Amherst and Atkins Corners until we can schedule a special town meeting early in the new year. Mr. Carson proposes that we not even put the zoning proposals on the warrant for the fall town meeting. Of course, he's not here to vote, but his voice is heard. Mr. O'Keefe?
Just one thing to add on that, and we were aware of his view and in fact cited it as part of our decision process at our meeting earlier today. So we're definitely taking his views into consideration. I will point out that he's been gone all week, and we did meet on Monday night this week, and we met on Wednesday night this week, and we had what I felt to be very productive and useful sessions. We made a lot of progress in those meetings, and to me, if you asked me last week where I stood on this, I would have been almost entirely in agreement with Bruce. My thinking has changed significantly based on the progress that we've made in the last week, as well as some of the comments and feedback that we've gotten this evening at this meeting and at our earlier meeting tonight. So my thinking has evolved a lot on that, and which is not, I don't know what Bruce would have done if he had been part of that process also, but we've seen some stuff that he hadn't seen yet, he has not seen.
I think I'll just say a few words. I too feel uncomfortable with it for a couple of reasons. One, it does feel rushed. I think that the timing is just off by a few weeks in terms of the amount of time I would feel comfortable with for public hearings and for time to deliberate amongst ourselves about the various provisions of the article, which is very complex. And the other piece that I'm uncomfortable with is that it seems to be at this point still a moving target. I mean, even though it can only be lesser in scope than it is now, if something comes out that I feel should be in there between now and town meeting, I don't think that gets a proper hearing. And I would feel much more comfortable if, if this were the fixed document as of tonight, possibly with the changes made by the zoning subcommittee, and with no further changes before town meeting.
I'd just like to point out that those are all valid concerns, as were Richard's. But there is no perfect process, and we kind of do go through this quite often with zoning articles. There are those who would like us to have everything wrapped up, completed, finalized, and then hold a public hearing on it, and then take it to town meeting. And there are those who feel exactly the opposite, that if it's wrapped up and completed and finalized, and then you have a public hearing on it, then you're not able to respond to all the comments and feedback and criticism that you've gotten at the public hearing. And those are almost diametrically opposite views, and they're both valid in their own way. But we need to have a process that lets us, work on things and make decisions about them, and while we're in the process of forming them and evaluating them also. So I don't know what the perfect process is. It's certainly not this, but I'm not sure that we could design something that addressed everyone's concerns in terms of timing.
I think I share all the comments that were made, and in thinking about it for myself, I would opt to have this go ahead on the warrant as a placeholder, understanding that many zoning initiatives that we've had in the past have had changes because of meetings with the zoning subcommittee or last week changes or insights people have brought in that have then become amendments. I think I would have a much stronger standard for myself when we vote about whether we're going to recommend or not recommend, and I think that's a time when there could be reconsideration about it's too much of a moving target or there isn't enough time to get it right. So I'm going to go ahead, not because I didn't really hear and appreciate what everyone said. I think the hearing in 2 weeks, the public hearing will be more robust if we're moving forward, but that doesn't mean I've made up my mind about recommending or not recommending. And just to say for myself, I'm most concerned about the amount of time that remains before town meeting to do really, really good public education and really, really good graphic and oral presentations, because I think this is going to require a lot of preparation to present to people. And so I think that's another timeline that we want to look at when we get to that real decision vote.
Yes, Mr. Rosenoy.
Yeah, I just like, I have two thoughts about it. Halloween is coming, and the ghosts are coming out, and the ghost that I am sensing is the ghost of development modifications past. And that ghost plus recent presentations to town meeting of articles from the planning board, I think have sent a message to the planning board to make sure that our presentations are complete, that they're vetted, that they're substantive, that counter arguments have been taken into consideration, that what we present to town meeting has a sense of finality from all sides, and that it's not still, as it's been described by various people here, a moving target or a shifting target. I just have very, I hear that there's an option to still make a decision on this before it goes to town meeting, and I think that's good. But I just have this dire sense of getting bombarded by town meeting again if this is not a thoroughly prepared article.
Mr. Tucker.
I can tell you from long experience that there have been any number of times when the process that is in some ways being described by Ms. Kruger and Mr. Rosnoy is really part of the process of developing an amendment. You won't know until your next public hearing whether it's ready in the sense that you mean it. And at that point, you can decide if it is, you go forward, and if not, you decide how you want to speak to it at town meeting. You can dismiss or refer it and aim forward with it. I can think of at least one amendment that the planning board took 4 or 5 tries over 6 years. It was not as complex as this to get through town meeting, not just because of complexity, but because there was a built-in disagreement within the community. So it's not simply a question of whether or not you're presenting it in a full and complete and as polished a fashion and clear a fashion as you can. The community is going to have a diversity of opinion, and that will affect how this goes forward. So I would encourage you to go forward with it with the sense that you will have to make a decision at your public hearing as to how you want to proceed from that point on.
Do we need a vote on this?
I'm going to make a motion to, that we advance this to the town warrant on Friday.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, question about that. Does that mean with the changes that the zoning subcommittee made this week?
Yes.
But that the public hearing was not privy to?
Yes, but then there's another public hearing in 2 weeks in which they will be privy to that.
Okay.
We have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. Vote in favor will put this article on the town warrant for town meeting without a recommendation one way or the other by the planning board as to whether the planning board recommends it.
Another question?
Yes.
What is the vote that's needed? Is this like approval for a site plan review, 5
It's a
needed?
majority.
Majority of members present.
Majority of present?
Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion passes. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Sorry, I'm new at this.
The man abstaining in his field.
Did abstain?
Yeah.
Abstain?
Negative.
Negative.
That was a no. So we have 5 in favor and 1 opposed. I'd like to thank all the members of the public who are here tonight. Thank you for coming.
Okay. Right.
God, our democracy is hurt. The thing about Village Centers is, who are the stakeholders who are the owners of downtown? Not the neighbors.
I'd like to ask, we do have other business to take care of. If you could take your conversations out into the hallway, that would be helpful to us. Thank you. Chris?
May I pass the minutes down for your signature?
Yes. All right. Moving on to the next agenda item is old business, master plan implementation. I think that was Mr. O'Keefe had created a charge for a proposed charge for the master plan committee. Did you have any changes to that suggested to you over the last week?
No changes suggested over the last week, no.
Did any other planning board members have any comments or suggestions to change the proposed charge? I have a couple, but I'm going to have to dig in my briefcase, Fred, if you'll excuse me a moment.
go to a commercial break.
Yes, take a 5-minute intermission if you need it. Excellent idea.
Oh, thank you, yeah, sorry.
I didn't mean to exclude you there. I just,
No,
there's a
sorry.
loss of
Oh, yeah, I understand.
quorum.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's been a long day.
Yeah.
David's hadn't gotten his packet on Saturday either. David, did you ever get your packet?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry I got impatient with you. I didn't.
No, that's good.
Normally they come in my mailbox on Friday, and so I started to worry when Monday rolled around.
Oh, points, oh. Yeah. I thought you liked my hat.
I do. It is an excellent hat.
No, it's changed.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble.
And not drastic.
Getting older, you know. Hat head? What's hat head?
Except when
Oh, that's when your hair gets smushed down? Oh, yeah, I should worry about that, huh? Yeah, that's good. Smushed hair.
How did your golf trip down to New Saybrook go? Or is it Old Saybrook?
Old Saybrook. Very well. It's a great little place. You haven't played there, huh? Yeah, it's a nice shoreline residential community right on the Sound. It's where Catherine Hepburn's house and
I'm aware of that. I stayed at the inn at, what's that next time? Inn at Mystic?
Yeah.
Where they.
I've been going through both of them at the same time,
Honeymoon.
hearing my notes
Oh,
last
she
time.
did?
At the,
This time it's
just right next to where she lives? Oh,
right up on the hill there at the old inn.
why wouldn't she go to Monaco or something?
It's an Excel chart.
Well, it's an interesting course. You play the first hole, and then you go walking through the neighborhood to get to the second hole.
Yes.
That and three are together, and around a few more houses. And there's no water on the course. I mean, if you hit into the Sound on a couple of holes, there's water. But it's very flat. It's not a very challenging course.
It's a short course?
Relatively short. 2 long
You
holes.
should probably review the changes at the next public hearing. Suggesting to make. Because he keeps track
How'd you shoot?
of all the changes.
Oh, yeah, I always shoot.
And he actually reviewed them
Still trying to
tonight
get
for
under
the
it.
zoning subcommittee.
50 for 9.
So with you.
But big thing in my golf game is I just bought a set of irons.
Good.
Yeah.
Did you get fitted for them, or did you buy them?
I did. Yeah,
Did you go?
I didn't mean to. I went to the Amherst golf course.
Really?
They have a pro there, Dave Tuig. And I didn't mean to buy new ones, but I got.
So it is.
Your wife didn't think you were going to buy new ones either.
Well, it started with my wife because I told her I would buy her a set for her birthday, which is later this month. My birthday is at the end of November. So then I realized, I mean, these things I have are just clunkers, and they're not. I'm missing a couple, and I really have the feeling they're holding me back. They're steel shafts, stiff. And, you know, with me and my age, I need seam flex. But he's recommending graphite shafts.
Yep.
So I started looking around. Well, first we took care of her, but she went online and she's looking all over for clubs. And she finds a great set, new, online, but like last year's model. Really reasonable price, which is great. And then we agreed, okay, well, we'll exchange birthday gifts. I'll buy her a set of irons. Find anything online that's within the same price range as what I'm getting her for hers. But is this all getting recorded on Amherst?
Yeah.
You
yes,
never know
is.
whether
It's
it is or not, so.
On Larry Kelly's blog.
So, Sue, you see, everybody will hear this. So,
Oh, well, this next part must be good.
well, all I could find was basically new clubs. You know, I was spending big bucks for a new set of irons, and I didn't want to do that. And finally, I found it at Dick's, found a set of old ones from last year or something, but it was still pretty expensive, like twice what we paid for it. So we said, well, we had some people in together. So we went down to. Somebody said, well, the guy down there has some things, and he'll fit you. So he was do the whole fitting thing. And getting 6 distinct clubs, not a whole broad set, but just 6 clubs, was expensive than what I could get otherwise, but it's still considerably more.
5 through pitching wedge?
5, 7. 8,
Oh, you got a sandwich. Good. 6, that's nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
King G15s. I don't have them yet. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it should help a lot with my golf game.
Well, we seem to have lost Connie and Chris. I think there may be a...
Taken captive by that angry mob.
Oh, no.
Seriously?
I didn't see any pitchforks or torches tonight, which I thought was a very good sign.
You know, I'm glad for that discussion. I wondered what the distinction was, why everybody's so upset about residential on Montague Road. Now I think I understand it.
I'm not sure I do.
Well, it's somewhat parochial. It's somewhat parochial.
It's change.
Okay. I had a couple of proposed changes. I don't know if anybody has the charge in front of them. For the Master Plan Implementation Committee, I had a couple of small changes, Jonathan, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
In the paragraph numbered 1, after the word monitor, I would insert relevant issues before town boards and committees, comma, and. Because I think that it's important that this committee pay attention to what's going on with the other committees in town. And I can repeat that if you like, but.
Please do.
Or I can pass it down to you. And again, after the word monitor, the sentence would read, monitor relevant issues before town boards and committees, comma, and the progress of implementation efforts, and issue annual reports to the planning board on the status of implementation
That makes
efforts.
sense.
Number 2, I think that an annual master plan report to the community would be adequate, so I would strike the change biannual to annual. That would be my suggestion. Every 2 years.
Semi-annual.
Semi-annual, oh, forgive me, okay, so then that's actually, you can skip that change.
I have
because
to
like
explain that to myself every time I encounter think it through.
Can we say every other year so that other people don't get confused?
Sure. The only thing I would note is that much of this language is verbatim from the master plan. Which doesn't mean that we can't change it.
Yeah, okay. You copied it out of the master plan. Thought you drafted this from whole cloth.
Mm-hmm. You did, huh?
All right, and the more substantive changes that are at the end, I would eliminate paragraph 4 entirely and incorporate it into paragraph 5 by saying, paragraph 4 currently reads, advise the planning board on the design of a process by which to carry out periodic updates to the plan at 5-year intervals.
Mm-hmm.
I would strike that and instead change paragraph 5 to read, lead the process to update the master plan, and then I would insert at 5-year intervals with input from the planning board. The rest of the paragraph reads, I would also eliminate the last sentence, which says the total process for completing and adopting the update should take less than 18 months. And I'm not sure, maybe there's a reason for including that, but I don't see it. The 18 months seems to me rather arbitrary and
perhaps
doesn't,
too long.
I would rather have the committee have the flexibility to choose its own time frame.
That's reasonable.
If those changes make sense, I don't know. Comments? Anyone?
No, I'm fine with all of that.
The next item on the agenda then unless someone has more comments about the implementation generally, is the planning board signatory authority. Apparently, there was procedural issue with granting signatory authority.
Sorry, I wasn't sure that we were done with this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you comment.
No, I guess my question was just next step. So if we're in agreement on this, perhaps we should send a letter to the select board or something asking them to form the committee if we're ready to take that step.
I so move.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Anyone abstaining?
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Drafting.
Who seconded? Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good. I think the select board will then have an opportunity to revise it themselves. Is that the way that works?
Yes, if they so choose, yeah. I have a soft copy of this, Chris, that I can incorporate David's changes and send it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. I didn't mean to move ahead too quickly either. Okay. Is there anything more on master plan implementation? Chris has something to say about signatory authority.
Unfortunately, I didn't know that you needed to take a vote, even though it says here on the letter, voted and approved. So we need to have a vote to authorize the chair, David Weber, the vice chair, Jonathan O'Keefe, and the clerk, Bruce Carson, to sign documents related to the subdivision control law. And then you can sign these letters and make the authorization. So.
We have a motion?
So moved.
And seconded. That was Richard.
Moved and seconded?
Stephen seconded. Not that we're in a rush. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? None opposed.
So I'll pass these down for your signature. And please sign both of them. There are 2 letters here.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, do we have any topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours prior to the meeting? Chris?
I am happy to report that the Attorney General did approve Article 32 that you passed at town meeting in the spring. Remember, there was a question about the procedure that led up to that? 32 is filling of land. So it's all been cleared by the Attorney General.
Was that due to the fact that we sort of had to re-advertise the public hearing?
Yes, that's right. That was the issue. And Jonathan sent them the appropriate information, and they were fine with it.
Excellent. People will be able to fill their land.
Otherwise, we have to come back to that.
Oh, God. Any other unreasonably forgotten topics?
Can't think of any.
Okay, new business, CPTC workshops brochure. We have a brochure in our packets describing the fall 2011 course descriptions. There's a number of good courses that are available. And Chris, is there any information from the town about
Money?
money?
No. There is the information, the sad information that there is no money. So anyone who would like to attend these courses would have to pay out of pocket, I'm afraid.
We could hold a bake sale. So thanks for providing us with this, and I urge all to look at these and see if there's anything of interest. I still no any new topics.
No new topics.
Not reasonably anticipated.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I do have one.
Oh, good.
As Richard noted earlier, Halloween is just around the corner, and with it comes the annual Amherst Educational Foundation Trivia Bee held the week before Halloween. Last year, the planning board put together a team to compete in that event, and I've been approached by the organizers to see if we were interested in doing so again. I recall us being highly successful and just this close from winning it if we hadn't gotten all those questions wrong.
I don't Trivia maniac.
That wasn't my recollection.
That was, so the format of this
Question
is
which team came in last?
I'd prefer not to explore that further. The format of this is teams of 4 people compete at the middle school in a trivia contest, and it's sponsored by members of the business community. So it's a fundraiser for AEF, but the teams don't put up money directly. What they do is they match a team up with a sponsor. So if we can come up with a group that wants to participate, they'll assign us a sponsor. So
say the day and the date again.
it's the 27th of October, which is a Thursday. I'm not sure what time it is, but it's probably at 7 p.m. or so at the middle school auditorium.
How much does a sponsorship cost?
I do not know. So I put that out there just to see if folks are interested in that. I myself am, so.
Any comment?
If we can put together 4
Volunteers?
people.
I'm interested, but I think I brought down the team last time.
It's the year for redemption.
I nominate Rob.
I'm interested. Bruce was interested last year, but didn't participate. So.
Okay. So that sounds like we can come up with 4 people.
Sounds like it.
If there's more
Do
than
we
4
wanna,
interested, then we'll have like a trivia
Shootout.
yeah, at our next
Consider
meeting.
getting sponsorship information so we sponsor ourselves, or?
I'm sure that would not be off the table, yeah, if we wanted to do that.
Okay.
I can find out.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So other members of the planning board would help sponsor the
that's
4-person team. I mean, everyone.
Oh, if you weren't participating, then you had to pay so that those who were participating were.
No, but.
Everyone.
What's my return on investment?
See how they do.
There are costumes involved also.
Right. What were we last year? Helmets or?
We all wore bike helmets, I think, or some kind of helmets.
Bump that up a little bit.
You're in charge.
Other
Yeah.
theme.
All right, then.
Form-based, something form-based.
Be the ghosts of development modification.
Yeah, right, exactly.
People with pitchforks.
Why not choose something successful, like chickens?
Oh, there we go. Chickens is good.
Who's going to be the rooster?
All right, thank you.
Right.
Okay, any A&Rs?
No A&Rs.
ZBA applications?
There's one ZBA application that you have not talked about yet. It's for Alpha Chi Omega, or maybe I did tell you about this. It's an appeal of the building inspector's cease and desist order. Apparently there's a fraternity that's operating on Nutting Avenue in a building that used to be a sorority, and the sorority had a special permit or was permitted somehow in the past, and the fraternity moved in. And now the question is whether the fraternity is allowed under the previous permit. And the building commissioner says no, but the proponents say yes. So are you interested in hearing more about that or reviewing that case?
Where's Nutting?
Nutting is near Fearing. I think it's perpendicular to Fearing.
I know, it's a little dead end that
So
goes
the
backs up to the visitors parking
The
lot.
question is basically, a fraternity was granted a permit, but now it's or a
I
sorority
think
was
it's
granted a permit. and now
a
it's-
sorority was either granted a permit or was a non-conforming legal use because the zoning changed at some point to not allow fraternities and sororities in the RG zoning district. So the sorority was legal, and then they decided not to be there anymore and to rent the house to a fraternity. And the fraternity is considered by the building commissioner to be a different use. And I think that's because the, what should I say, the results of having a fraternity in a building might be different from the results of having a sorority there.
So I understand, it's not because the use was just granted to that one entity and the entity changed. It's the difference between a sorority and a fraternity, one being an association of females and one being an association of males is the difference?
I believe that's the contention that
Wow.
is
I'm gonna
being made.
watch that one. But
Maybe
not
we should,
here.
Zoning board is going to deal with that. There really aren't any site issues as far as I know.
But I guess it depends on whether or not whatever the exception was ran with the actual people or if it ran with the property, right? Wouldn't that be the?
Yeah, but what Chris said is that's not the basis of the contention.
I'm afraid I don't know whether this sorority had a special permit or whether it was a non-conforming legal use. If it had a special permit, it would have been granted to a sorority, and there would have been certain conditions placed on it based on the ZBA's assessment of how the use would be performed. Anyway, the building commissioner has made this determination that a fraternity is not allowed because it's different from a sorority, and now the ZBA has to resolve the issue of whether a fraternity should be allowed or not. But I don't think there are any site issues for consideration by the planning board.
Not interested.
I'll be interested to hear how it came out, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Question for like philosophy class. Either that or the Supreme Court.
All right. Any upcoming special permit, site plan review, or sub-applications? Yes, there is a site plan review application that was just filed by the Lord Jeff, and they want to have hours past the hours that they were originally permitted by the planning board. They'd like to have their restaurant open until 1, and they also want to have seasonal outdoor dining and live entertainment. So they are coming to you for an amendment to their existing site plan review and for a special permit for the live entertainment. And you will be hearing that on November 2nd, I believe. Okay. Excellent. Anything else? No. Okay. A subcommittee report from zoning.
You all now know just as much as we do as about the current status of our zoning effort, so I will spare you a subcommittee report.
Okay, committee reports, PVPC.
No report. We meet next week.
CPAC. I forget who's. Sandy's not here, okay. Agricultural Commission. I missed last month's meeting, and I'm going to miss this one too. I'll be out of town next week. If anyone is interested, they're meeting next Tuesday at 7 in the downstairs meeting room. Otherwise, I'll try to get the minutes and report on that. Transportation?
No action on that yet.
ARA.
They met last night, and I attended the meeting. They talked about the traffic study that UMass and the town are going to collaborate or cooperate on using the same traffic engineers, Vanessa Hagan, Bruzen, that UMass is using now for some campus work. And the results from that traffic study, at least in my notes, should be available by December, or sometime in December. They also discussed a request that would be made to town meeting for our housing needs market study. I think the town meeting for an appropriation. Maybe, because the money's already there, but for about $40,000 to get housing needs. It came out of the ARA's work on the Gateway project and wondering what the housing market would be for different types of housing, and I guess the scope has expanded to be comprehensive, to look at the market across the whole town. And then they discussed a request to town meeting for funds for form-based zoning for the Gateway District and the whole downtown, and the planning director reported that that was like not going to go forward as a request at this time. And there was some discussion about form-based zoning, and some members of the public had come, and just some general conversation about that. And then the planning director reported about converting the zoning cadastre to a GIS, electronic-based system, which we had seen at our prior meeting. So I think that pretty much covers what they did, and then they went into executive session.
I have a question about that, Connie. Regarding the first thing you mentioned, the traffic study that the university is doing, and you said the town is coordinating?
Well, the town is adding, extending that traffic study to the area that the gateway, to the gateway area, to extend it down towards like.
Is it UMass? Is it UMass extending the? You said the town, but
I think UMass is, I don't know if it's UMass alone that's agreed to extend it, or if the, I mean, working with the town to extend it.
I thought UMass had agreed to do that for the benefit of the town, or benefit of both.
I wasn't clear about who is,
Yeah.
but that's been added to the scope of the traffic work. Added to the scope of the consultants who are already doing traffic work. You probably know more, yeah, okay. So the town's collaborating but not paying.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's always good.
So it's going to extend as far south as Triangle and East Pleasant, North Pleasant area, or further into the center of town? And yet, my other question, while you're thinking about it, my other question is it a typical traffic study like a developer would be required to provide for a development project? That is to say, counting cars and traffic and speed limits and things like that? Or is it a sort of a more of a comprehensive transportation study?
I think my impression is, you know what, I think you'd have to talk to.
Too bad Nils left.
Yeah, well, Nils or to Mr. Tucker, because he was at that meeting with us. And this was just sort of a report out, and I didn't know, I don't know, I really don't know, but those are good questions.
I'll follow up on that.
Yeah, good to find out. So I know you're interested in that, and sorry I can't give you answers.
Are those the traffic engineers that built that most excellent little roundabout there?
VHB, was that the?
Oh, with the one.
Oh, on campus.
On campus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the same group.
I think that was VHB.
Was it? That's really works well. I have
Okay,
to
so
say.
most excellent was meant in sincerity.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh, definitely. I like it. I wish they would put one in North Amherst too, where the 5-way intersection is.
Yeah.
You have the gavel, man.
Yeah.
Okay, design review board. Anyone?
Oh, we were going to solicit.
We don't have anybody yet.
I still have been talking to various people about being on that, then also applying for the apparent vacancy on the planning board, but so far I'm not sure anyone stepped forward. Some people are, do you get the citizen activity, or I guess let's go to the town manager.
I don't get the forms, no, that goes.
I've been informed by a member of the select board that there is an applicant under consideration.
For the planning board?
For the planning board.
Oh, good.
David, do you know whether Jonathan has resigned? It was unclear from his statement last time around
Yes.
whether he was actually resigning or whether he was sort of indicating an intention to resign.
Yes, he officially resigned.
Okay.
Oh, he did?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to finish out the year.
Yeah, that was
You know,
my understanding.
Chris, maybe you could send that letter.
Send the letter to everyone?
Yeah, to everyone. I didn't realize everyone hadn't gotten it. He wrote a very nice sort of closing letter describing why he was resigning. And of course, it was the same reasons that he spoke to at the last meeting, but worth a read. And I thanks.
So that is an actual vacancy now that we have?
It is an actual vacancy. So if you know anyone who has an interest. But apparently there's a pretty serious candidate who happens to be an architect, who I don't know the name.
Good, we need somebody serious on this board.
Any other boards and committees? I don't think we have any other ones, do we? I don't have any report, except that I'm going to take a vacation next week, so we'll. Second, thank you. Report of staff?
No report.
Okay, that brings us to the last item, XII, adjournment. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
apologize for my procedural missteps throughout.
None.
We are